My name is Sarah, and I was 27 years old when I thought I had met the love of my life, Alex. Our whirlwind romance quickly led to a beautiful wedding, and within just a year of knowing each other, we became husband and wife. Alex worked as an accountant, a man whose charm and laughter could make anyone feel at ease. I, on the other hand, worked in digital marketing, and I loved spending my weekends painting landscapes or experimenting with abstract art. We seemed like the perfect pair. I was organized and loved planning things in advance, while Alex was spontaneous and enjoyed living in the moment. It felt like we complemented each other perfectly, or, at least, that's how it seemed at first. We decided to settle in San Francisco, a bustling city with endless opportunities and stunning views. I was excited about building a new life together in such a vibrant place. However, our marriage came with an added layer of complexity. Alex's parents, Margaret and Logan. While they lived in the suburbs, they were very involved in Alex's life, often visiting us unannounced or calling frequently to check in. Initially, I thought their involvement was sweet, but as time went on, their behavior started to feel intrusive. From the very beginning, there were subtle signs that things might not go as smoothly as I'd hoped. It started with small incidents, Margaret making comments about how we should decorate our apartment or Logan questioning our financial decisions. I brushed it off, thinking it was normal for parents to be protective. But soon, their influence began to seep into every aspect of our lives, leading to conflicts I never anticipated. Little did I know, their demands and expectations would test the very foundation of our relationship. At first, I tried to give Margaret and Logan the benefit of the doubt. They were Alex's parents, after all, and I wanted to build a good relationship with them. But as time went on, their involvement in our lives became harder to ignore. One of the first red flags appeared shortly after our wedding, during a casual visit to our apartment. We were unpacking wedding gifts when Margaret spotted an elegant crystal vase sent by my Aunt Lisa. She immediately picked it up and admired it. "This would look perfect in our living room," she said, her voice full of enthusiasm. "Don't you think, Logan?" Before I could respond, Logan chimed in, "Oh, absolutely. You don't mind, do you, Sarah? It'll just gather dust here." I laughed nervously, trying to defuse the moment. Actually, I was planning to put it on the dining table. "It's such a thoughtful gift." Margaret's smile faded slightly, and she gave me a pointed look. "Sarah, in a family, we learn to share. You'll see how much easier things are when we all help each other out." I glanced at Alex, hoping he'd step in, but he seemed distracted by a set of kitchen tools we'd just unwrapped. "Mom, that's Sarah's gift," he finally said, laughing it off. "Let's not argue over a vase." Margaret let it go for the moment, but the encounter left me unsettled. It wasn't just about the vase. It was about the way they casually claimed things that weren't theirs and expected me to go along with it. Things escalated further when Margaret and Logan began making frequent comments about our finances. They weren't shy about asking how much we earned or what we spent on certain items. One evening, Logan even suggested that we should give them access to a separate bank account with a high-limit ATM card for family emergencies. "It's just practical," he said, as if it were a normal request. "We'd only use it if absolutely necessary." I was stunned. "Logan, we're happy to help if there's ever a real emergency, but sharing our finances? That's a bit much." Margaret rolled her eyes. "Sarah, you need to stop being so rigid. We're family now." Alex, as usual, avoided taking sides, leaving me to fend for myself. Their constant interference started to feel suffocating, and I couldn't shake the growing sense that they didn't respect our boundaries or our marriage. As our first wedding anniversary approached, I was determined to make it a memorable celebration. Alex and I had been through a challenging year, and I wanted this day to remind us of the love that had brought us together. Since it also coincided with New Year's Eve, I planned a special dinner at an upscale restaurant in San Francisco called the Golden Pearl. It was a cozy yet elegant spot with soft lighting and a menu filled with delicious dishes we both loved. Wanting to include Alex's parents, Margaret and Logan, I extended an invitation, hoping this would help bridge some of the growing tension between us. When we arrived at the restaurant, Margaret and Logan were already seated, eagerly browsing the menu. "This place is stunning," Margaret remarked, her eyes scanning the gold-accented decor. "I'm sure it's not cheap." I smiled politely and took my seat, determined to keep the evening pleasant. As we settled in, Alex reached for my hand under the table and squeezed it gently, a silent gesture of support. It gave me a glimmer of hope that the night would go smoothly. When the waiter arrived, Margaret wasted no time. "We'll start with the seafood platter," she declared, before turning to Logan. "And let's get the filet mignon. Oh, and add a bottle of your best champagne." I blinked in surprise at her boldness. I had expected them to order within reason, considering we were footing the bill. I chose a simple pasta dish, and Alex went with his favorite, a grilled salmon. "Quite the celebration," I commented lightly, trying to keep the mood cheerful. Alex chuckled nervously, but didn't say much. Throughout dinner, Margaret and Logan seemed to relish every bite, chatting away as if it were a grand feast in their honor. I found myself growing increasingly uncomfortable as the unspoken expectation that we would cover the bill weighed heavily on me. When the check finally arrived, I couldn't help but notice Alex's slight hesitation before handing over his card. As we left the restaurant, Margaret linked her arm with mine and sighed happily. "What a lovely evening. We should do this again next year. Maybe someplace even fancier." Her words lingered with me long after the dinner was over. Instead of strengthening our family bonds, the evening only deepened my unease. It became clear that Margaret and Logan's idea of family was less about connection and more about taking advantage of every opportunity. As the holidays approached, San Francisco sparkled with festive lights and decorations. Alex and I had started preparing our apartment for the season, blending autumnal tones with hints of New Year cheer. I loved the warmth and joy that came with this time of year, and I wanted to make it special for us. One evening, as we hung string lights around the living room windows, Alex's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and chuckled. "It's my parents," he said, holding up the screen. "They've already sent over their holiday wish list." "Wish lists?" I asked, surprised. "Yeah, they do this every year. It's their way of making shopping easier," Alex explained, scrolling through the message before handing me his phone. As I read the list, my surprise turned into disbelief. It wasn't just a few small items. They were requesting high-end electronics, luxury clothes, and expensive accessories. It felt more like a shopping spree than a wish list. "They can't be serious," I said, shaking my head. Alex shrugged, brushing it off. "They like nice things. It's just how they are." I bit my tongue, trying to keep my frustration in check. While I wanted to focus on making this holiday about love and togetherness, their extravagant demands made it feel transactional. It wasn't just about the gifts, it was the unspoken expectation that we'd fulfill their every wish without question. Meanwhile, I had been planning a thoughtful surprise for Alex's birthday, which fell just before the new year. I had saved up to buy him the sleek watch he'd been admiring for months. It was a gift meant to show him how much I appreciated him and everything he did for us. But the growing list of obligations to his parents made me feel like my efforts were overshadowed. When it came time to exchange gifts, I opted for something practical yet nice for Margaret and Logan, a high-quality coffee maker. In return, they gave me a set of scented candles. While the gesture was kind, the imbalance between what they expected and what they gave in return was glaring. Alex, however, seemed thrilled with the sophisticated drone they gifted him. It was as though their generosity was directed solely at him, leaving me feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. As the season went on, the strain of these unspoken expectations only grew, making me question whether the holidays, or our relationship, could ever truly feel balanced. Amidst the mounting tension in our marriage, I decided to plan something special to bring Alex and me closer. We had often talked about visiting Venice, strolling through its enchanting canals, and soaking in its romantic charm. When I received a surprise holiday bonus from work, I knew exactly how I wanted to use it. A romantic getaway for just the two of us. It felt like the perfect opportunity to reconnect and rekindle the love that had been overshadowed by his parents' constant demands. One evening over dinner, I shared the news with Alex. "Guess what? I've booked us a trip to Venice," I said, barely able to contain my excitement. His eyes lit up, and a genuine smile spread across his face. Are you serious? Venice? That's amazing, Sarah. He stood up and kissed me, his excitement palpable. For a brief moment, it felt like we were back to being the carefree couple we used to be. But that joy was short-lived. Alex's phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. It was his mother, Margaret. Without hesitation, he picked it up and shared our plans with her, his voice brimming with excitement. Mom, guess what? Sarah and I are going to Venice. I cringed. I had hoped he would keep the news to ourselves, at least for a little while. As he spoke, I watched his enthusiasm gradually fade, replaced by a familiar look of conflict. I know. You've always wanted to go, he said, his tone softening. When he hung up, he turned to me with an apologetic expression. They want to come with us, he said, as though seeking my approval. My heart sank. Come with us? Alex, this trip was meant to be for us. Just the two of us, I said, my voice trembling with frustration. I know, he replied hesitantly. But they've never been, and it's always been a dream of theirs. They feel left out, and I'd feel bad saying no. I try to keep my composure. Alex, we've already sacrificed so much for them. This is supposed to be our time. Our dream. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. I just don't want to disappoint them. And what about me? What about us? Does that not matter? My voice was firm, but laced with hurt. Despite my protests, Alex wavered. The next morning, I woke to find our joint account depleted, multiple charges for airline tickets, hotel bookings, and other expenses for a trip to Venice. My hands trembled as I realized the unthinkable. Alex had gone behind my back and booked the trip for himself and his parents, using the bonus I had earned. When I confronted him later that day, his explanation was weak. I thought it would be easier this way, he muttered, avoiding my eyes. This was supposed to be our trip, I said, tears of betrayal welling in my eyes. You've made your choice, Alex. That moment marked the breaking point. The trust one had once placed in him shattered, leaving me to question whether our marriage could survive such a betrayal. I woke up the next morning to an unsettling quiet in our apartment. The bed next to me was untouched, and Alex was nowhere to be found. Rubbing my eyes, I reached for my phone, hoping to see a message from him explaining where he'd gone. Instead, my screen was filled with notifications, bank alerts. My heart sank as I opened the emails, each one revealing a string of transactions, airline tickets, luxury hotel bookings, and even prepaid tours. My holiday bonus, the money I had planned to use for our dream trip to Venice, was almost entirely gone. I sat there in shock, the weight of what had happened sinking in. Alex hadn't just ignored my wishes. He had gone behind my back, using my bonus to fund a trip to Venice with his parents. The timestamps on the flight tickets showed the plane had already departed. They were gone, halfway across the world, enjoying the vacation that was supposed to be ours. My hands trembled as I dialed Alex's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Alex, I said, my voice shaking, I saw the charges. You took your parents to Venice, using my bonus. I don't even know what to say. I hope it was worth it. I hung up, my words feeling as hollow as the silence that filled our apartment. Anger and betrayal swirled inside me. How could he do this? How could he disregard everything we had planned, everything I had worked for? I couldn't sit still. I needed to take action. I logged into my accounts and began canceling everything tied to the trip that was still refundable, hotel reservations, tour packages, even their return flights. If they wanted to continue their trip, they'd have to pay for it themselves. Each cancellation felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. Once that was done, I called the bank and removed Alex's access to my accounts. As I spoke with the bank manager, my voice steadied. I want to make sure he can't access anything else, I said firmly. The manager was understanding, and by the end of the call, my finances were secure. Later that day, Alex finally called. Sarah, he began, his tone hesitant. I didn't mean for it to turn out like this. I interrupted him, my voice cold. You didn't mean for it to turn out like this? You used my money, Alex. You didn't even ask me. They're my parents, he said defensively. I couldn't say no to them. And you didn't think twice about saying no to me, I shot back. You made your choice, Alex. And now I'm making mine. That evening, I packed my belongings, my heart heavy with the realization that our marriage had reached its breaking point. As I folded my clothes and gathered my things, I came across my wedding ring. It felt cold and weighty in my hand. I left it on the kitchen counter, a silent symbol of the trust and love that had been shattered. By the time I walked out the door, I knew there was no going back. Alex had chosen his parents over me, and in doing so, he had destroyed the foundation of our relationship. As I drove away, a mix of sadness and empowerment coursed through me. This betrayal had broken my heart, but it had also freed me from a marriage built on uneven ground. It was time to rebuild my life on my own terms. As I drove away from the apartment, a wave of emotions washed over me. Anger, sadness, and a strange sense of relief. The betrayal had cut deep, but I realized I couldn't dwell on what was lost. It was time to take back control of my life. Alex's actions had made it clear that our marriage, which I had thought was built on trust and partnership, was instead overshadowed by his inability to set boundaries with his parents. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could decide how to move forward. My first stop was the bank. I walked into the manager's office, determined to secure my finances. I need to remove my husband's access to all my accounts, I explained firmly. The manager, a kind woman in her 40s, listened patiently and assured me they would handle everything. By the time I left, I felt a renewed sense of control. Alex would no longer have the ability to exploit my hard-earned money. Next, I contacted a lawyer. Filing for divorce was a decision I hadn't made lightly, but it was the only path that made sense. Alex had shown me where his priorities lay, and they weren't with our marriage. The lawyer, a sharp and empathetic professional, reassured me that I was taking the right steps to protect myself. This process might feel overwhelming, she said, but you're making a brave choice. We'll ensure this is as smooth as possible. With the legal process underway, I packed my belongings and moved in with my sister, Emma. She welcomed me with open arms, her home offering a much-needed sanctuary during this turbulent time. You're stronger than you realize, she said, handing me a cup of tea as we sat at her kitchen table. Her words gave me comfort and strength. Over the next few weeks, I focused on rebuilding my life. I enrolled in a community art class to reignite my passion for painting and started exploring new hobbies that brought me joy. My sister's support and encouragement helped me see the brighter side of this new chapter. Slowly but surely, I began to reclaim my independence and rediscover the person I had been before my life became entangled with Alex's family. One day, I received a call from Alex. His voice was filled with regret. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Can we please talk?" I paused, letting his words sink in. "There's nothing left to say, Alex," I replied calmly. "I gave you everything, and you chose to betray that trust. I hope you learned from this, but I'm moving on." That call marked the end of a chapter one no longer wanted to revisit. From that moment forward, I vowed to prioritize my happiness and never let anyone diminish my worth again. Taking control wasn't easy, but it was necessary. With every step forward, I felt stronger, freer, and ready to embrace a future full of possibilities. The confrontation I had been dreading came sooner than I expected. It was a quiet Saturday morning at my sister Emma's house. I was sipping coffee at the kitchen table when there was a loud knock at the door. Emma glanced at me, concern flashing in her eyes, before going to answer it. Standing on the porch were Margaret and Logan, their expressions a mix of anger and determination. Without waiting for an invitation, they barged in. Margaret's voice was sharp and accusing. "Sarah, we need to talk." "What on earth do you think you're doing, canceling our trip? You've caused such an inconvenience." Logan nodded in agreement, his tone equally heated. "We trusted you, and you pulled the rug out from under us. This is no way to treat family." I took a deep breath, standing my ground. "Family?" I said, my voice steady. "Is that what you call what you've been doing? Demanding my money, disregarding my feelings, and using Alex to manipulate me? That's not family. That's selfishness. Margaret gasped, clearly taken aback by my boldness. Selfishness? We've only ever wanted what's best for Alex. And you're tearing this family apart with your stubbornness. Emma stepped forward, placing herself protectively between me and them. That's enough, she said firmly. You're not going to come into my house and insult my sister. Sarah doesn't owe you anything. Margaret's face turned red with anger. This is none of your business, she snapped. It became my business the moment you crossed the line, Emma shot back. You're not here to fix anything. You're here to bully her. And it's not going to work. The argument escalated, drawing the attention of Emma's neighbors. Peeking through windows and standing on porches, they watched as the confrontation unfolded. Despite the rising tension, I remained calm, letting Emma handle the brunt of their hostility. Her unwavering support gave me the strength I needed. Eventually, Margaret and Logan realized they weren't going to get their way. Margaret huffed dramatically and stormed toward the door. You're making a mistake, Sarah. You'll regret this, she said as a final parting shot. I won't, I replied firmly, meeting her glare with quiet determination. I've already made the right choice. As the door closed behind them, the air felt lighter. Emma hugged me tightly, her voice filled with pride. You handled that so well. They're gone, and they're not your problem anymore. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. The confrontation hadn't been easy, but it was a necessary step in reclaiming my life. Margaret and Logan's manipulation no longer had any power over me. I was free to move forward, stronger and more resolute than ever. The decision to file for divorce wasn't easy, but it was necessary. After everything Alex had done, his betrayal, his failure to stand by me, and his family's relentless manipulation, I knew there was no repairing our marriage. I had tried to hold on, to believe in the promises we made on our wedding day, but trust once broken is almost impossible to rebuild. Filing for divorce was the first step toward reclaiming my life and putting an end to the chaos that had consumed it. The process itself felt cold and transactional, a stark contrast to the emotions that swirled within me. I met with my lawyer, a kind but no-nonsense woman named Rachel, who assured me I was doing the right thing. This won't be easy, she said, her tone firm but compassionate, but it's the best decision for your future. As we worked through the paperwork, dividing assets and untangling the financial ties between Alex and me, I felt the weight of the past year begin to lift. Each signature on the documents felt like cutting a tether that had been holding me back. While Alex tried to negotiate and plead for a second chance, I stood firm. His words no longer held any power over me. On the day the divorce was finalized, I walked out of the courthouse feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Emma was waiting for me outside, her arms open for a comforting hug. You did it, she said, her voice filled with pride. This is the start of something new. I nodded, letting her words sink in. The chapter with Alex was closed, and while it hadn't ended the way I had hoped, it was over. For the first time in a long time, I felt free from the manipulation, the guilt, and the constant feeling of being second place in my own marriage. Over the following weeks, I focused on rebuilding my life. I moved into a small but cozy apartment in San Francisco, filling it with things that brought me joy, plants, books, and artwork that reminded me of my passions. I dove back into painting, something I had neglected during the turbulence of my marriage, and even started attending local art classes to connect with like-minded people. Alex continued to reach out, leaving voicemails and sending messages, but I didn't respond. His apologies and pleas felt hollow now, overshadowed by the choices he had made. Eventually, I blocked his number. It was a small act, but it felt monumental, a final step in severing the last tie to a relationship that no longer served me. One evening, as I stood on my balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, I felt a sense of peace. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk. The divorce had been painful, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter. I was finally free to live my life on my own terms, with no one else's expectations weighing me down. After the divorce was finalized, I realized it wasn't just the end of my marriage, It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. While the pain of betrayal lingered, it was now accompanied by a sense of freedom and possibility. I wasn't defined by the choices Alex had made or the influence his parents had exerted over my life. I was finally free to focus on myself and build a future that was entirely my own. I moved into a cozy apartment in San Francisco, a space that quickly became my sanctuary. It was modest but filled with light, and I decorated it with things that made me happy: lush green plants, framed artwork, and books I'd always meant to read. The apartment was more than just a place to live. It was a fresh start. Every piece of furniture I chose, every photo I hung, was a small act of reclaiming my independence. To help me heal and rediscover my passions, I threw myself into painting again. It had always been my escape, but during my marriage, I'd let it slip away. I enrolled in a local art class where I met people who shared my love for creativity. The camaraderie of the group was uplifting, and for the first time in a long while, I felt inspired. With every stroke of the brush, I felt a piece of myself returning. I also took steps to pursue new interests and challenges. I signed up for a yoga class, something I'd always been curious about but never made time for. The practice taught me to find balance, not just physically but emotionally as well. It helped me let go of the resentment I held toward Alex and his parents, replacing it with a quiet determination to move forward. Emma, my sister, remained my rock throughout this journey. She encouraged me to take risks and embrace the unknown. "This is your time, Sarah," she'd say, her unwavering support keeping me grounded. With her help, I even started volunteering at a local community center where I taught art classes to children. Seeing their joy and creativity reminded me of the power of starting fresh. Though the road ahead was uncertain, it no longer felt daunting. Every day was an opportunity to rebuild, to grow, and to become the person I had always wanted to be. My past no longer defined me. It had shaped me, but it didn't hold me back. As I stood on my balcony one evening, watching the vibrant city lights of San Francisco, I felt a deep sense of peace. This was my new beginning, a life filled with hope, possibility, and the freedom to write my own story. The journey to empowerment and healing wasn't easy, but it was worth every step. In the weeks following my divorce, I realized that rebuilding my life was more than just starting over. It was about rediscovering who I was and reclaiming my strength. The betrayal I had endured had left scars, but they became reminders of my resilience. I had faced heartbreak, manipulation, and loss, yet here I was, standing tall and ready to move forward. One of the most transformative steps in my healing journey was learning to prioritize myself. For so long, I had put others first: Alex, his parents, and the expectations they placed on me. Now it was time to focus on what I wanted and needed. I created a list of goals, both big and small, that brought me joy and purpose. From taking solo trips around San Francisco to exploring new hobbies like pottery and yoga, every accomplishment felt like a small victory. Painting became more than just a hobby. It became a form of therapy. Each brushstroke helped me process the emotions I had been carrying. I poured my feelings onto the canvas, creating vibrant and expressive pieces that reflected my journey. The art class I had joined introduced me to a supportive community, and their encouragement reminded me that I wasn't alone. My sister Emma played a vital role in this period of healing. Her unwavering belief in me gave me the courage to step out of my comfort zone and embrace new opportunities. She often reminded me, "You're stronger than you think, Sarah. You've already proven that." Over time, I found myself smiling more and dwelling on the past less. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but I learned to carry it without letting it weigh me down. I realized that forgiveness wasn't for Alex or his parents. It was for me. Letting go of the anger freed me to fully embrace the future. Empowerment wasn't just about moving on, it was about thriving. I was no longer defined by what I had lost, but by what I was building, a life filled with passion, independence, and hope. My story was mine to rewrite, and I was determined to make it one of strength and joy.